Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are really getting into something huge, something defining for managers right now, the hybrid paradox. You know, this constant push and pull between the flexibility people want, really demand, and the connection, the culture that, well, organizations just need to function.
It's the friction, isn't it? And it's definitely not going away. For ages, we just relied on being in the same room.
Right.
Physical presence was the glue for everything. Authority, trust, just bumping into people.
Yeah, osmosis.
Exactly. And now that glue is kind of dissolving across distance. Leaders are realizing, maybe slowly, that the real problem isn't the tech. It's not about Zoom or Slack. It's the human systems.
Human systems.
Yeah.
Like what specifically?
Like how we actually handle authority when your boss is miles away, how you build trust, and maybe most importantly, how we deal with just sheer volatility, unpredictability.
Right. So this deep dive, our mission today, is really about finding those timeless, those foundational leadership strategies that can cut through all that noise, that volatility. We've pulled together a pretty eclectic mix of sources. We've got ancient military thinking, Viktor Frankl's philosophy, even modern stuff like Navy SEAL principles and Pixar's creative process.
It's a fascinating stack.
Yeah. The idea is to pull out the core principles you, the listener, need to navigate this new world. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, and if you look at the big picture, the leader's job in this hybrid setup, it's fundamentally different. It's not about managing presence anymore.
No.
It's learning how to lead effectively when your team is scattered, maybe across time zones, and your authority, the very idea of it, is tested by randomness, by unexpected things happening every single day.
So you have to pivot.
You absolutely have to pivot from being a manager of presence to being really a manager of principles.
Okay, so let's start right there with that randomness, that volatility. Because if this hybrid thing feels chaotic sometimes, well, maybe the sources are telling us that chaos isn't just noise. Maybe it's the engine for opportunity. And first stop has to be Nassim Taleb, right? Antifragility.
Antifragility, yes, it's such a powerful concept, and it's more than just being resilient. Resilience means you bounce back from a shock.
Right, you survive it.
Antifragility means you actually gain from disorder, from randomness, from stressors. These things make the system stronger. It's about positive asymmetry, more potential upside than downside from random events.
And that's key because we often treat this flexibility, this lack of structure, as a threat, don't we?
We do. We instinctively want control, predictability.
No.
But Taleb's point is crucial. Treating hybrid work purely as a problem to be contained, trying to eliminate the inherent unpredictability, is like trying to protect muscles by never using them.
They just weaken.
Exactly. Depriving complex systems and organizations are definitely complex systems of volatility actually harms them. They atrophy, they weaken, die, or eventually blow up.
So if managers are fighting tooth and nail for rigid schedules, forcing everyone back 5 days a week just for the sake of predictability,
they're potentially making the organization more fragile. Not less. Think about it. A rigid, centralized system that depends on everyone doing the same thing at the same time. It snaps when a real crisis hits or a key tool fails. There's no backup, no decentralized adaptation.
So the lack of structure in hybrid work.
That unpredictability, that inherent messiness we have to see it as a positive stressor. Something to harness, not a bug to fix.
Okay, how do you harness that stress? Like, give me an example. The stress of asynchronous communication, maybe. People hate waiting for replies sometimes.
That's a perfect example. Look, in the old office model, we relied heavily on, quick chats, overhearing things, very fragile, actually.
Yeah, it relies on everyone being there.
Right. The stressor of working asynchronously forces teams to get better at other things. Things like writing clearly, documenting processes properly, mapping workflows. These are huge gains for the organization.
Gains that last.
Exactly. They make the system stronger long after the initial, maybe uncomfortable adjustment period. That's anti-fragility right there in action.
Okay, so we accept volatility, maybe even embrace it. But how do we actually prepare for the big, unpredictable shifts, the things you just can't see coming? Andrew Grove, the Intel guy, got some stark ideas on this.
He did. He talked about strategic inflection points. These aren't just small changes. They're fundamental seismic shifts in the landscape, like the move from mainframes to PCs back then, or arguably this massive shift to distributed work now.
And his point was, You can't plan for those in detail.
No amount of forecasting, no 5-year plan can reliably predict them, so the solution isn't better crystal balls, it's building better response capabilities.
You use the fire department analogy.
Yeah, it's a great one. A
Yeah.
fire department has no idea where the next fire will be or how big or what kind. They can't predict the what.
Right.
So they focus entirely on readiness. Building an energetic, efficient, well-trained team that can handle the totally unexpected just as smoothly as routine calls. The focus shifts from prediction to preparation and speed of response.
But that readiness, it demands tough choices, right?
Mm.
Grove himself admitted struggling with this during Intel's memory chip crisis in the 80s. He warned about the too little too late syndrome.
And that self-critique is so important. Look, the memory business was Intel. It was their identity. But cheaper Japanese competitors were crushing them.
Painful.
Incredibly painful. And Grove found it was easier to tell others to be bold than to force his own organization through the really disruptive change, getting out of memory entirely, betting the farm on microprocessors.
So the too little too late is about tinkering at the edges.
Exactly. Adjusting things marginally, tweaking policies, instead of making the fundamental, maybe painful resource shifts because of attachment or ego or just inertia. In today's volatile hybrid world, leaders have to realize that small tweaks to the remote work policy probably aren't going to cut it if the fundamental nature of work is shifting under their feet.
And overcoming that inertia, that resistance to deep change, means being willing to let go of what worked before. Which brings us to this idea of the beginner's mind.
Right, and this shifts us into the creative realm, looking at Ed Catmull's insights from Pixar. He observed this almost universal tendency in successful organizations. The moment they get successful,
They get rigid.
they start casting off that initial startup mentality. They resist the beginner's mind, the not knowing, and because of that, they become much more likely to just repeat past successes rather than create something genuinely new, which, paradoxically, makes failure more likely when the world changes.
He had that great anecdote about kids' drawings, didn't he?
Oh, it's a brilliant metaphor. He noticed how first and second graders' drawings were just free, inventive, full of life. But by fifth grade,
And more self-conscious.
totally tentative, less inventive. Why? Because they become afraid of judgment, of what others thought. They develop that internal critic. And that fear kills creative freedom, especially you can imagine in hybrid teams, where maybe you feel more scrutinized on video calls or you worry about sending work that isn't perfect asynchronously.
It connects really deeply to Zen ideas, too. This need to let go of what you think you already know.
Absolutely. Korean Zen talks about not no mind being open, not locked into your established self. Japanese Zen has the beginner's mind. Even composers like Philip Glass said they had to actively try to get rid of their established style, their voice, to really innovate.
So for hybrid leaders,
The message is, you probably don't know the best way to manage this yet. Nobody does perfectly. So you have to operate from a place of, let's say, humble experimentation, not rigid certainty, if you want to find structures that actually work in this new reality.
it's interesting how this theme of embracing almost existential pressure pops up in military strategy, too. It sounds a bit intense, but it really informs how much ownership you need to push out to teams that aren't physically with you.
Right, Clausewitz, Sun Tzu. They offer a perspective on volatility that's directly relevant to compelling independent action from dispersed units. Sun Tzu's famous line, place your army in deadly peril and it will survive. Plunge it into desperate straits and it will come off in safety.
Now, the idea isn't to be reckless.
No, not at all. It's a recognition that when retreat isn't an option, when the stakes are incredibly high and unavoidable, human focus, dedication, resourcefulness, they just max out.
And military thinking, especially for small war tactics with scattered units.
It favors the active defense. You don't just tell your dispersed teams, your project squads to sit tight and wait for orders from HQ. You empower them. You expect them to act proactively based on the situation they see on the ground.
And that empowerment often comes from sheer necessity, right? Like the Han Xin story.
That's a classic. This general, Han Xin, deliberately positions his troops with their backs to the river time. Strategically, that's a terrible spot, a desperate strait.
Nowhere to run.
Exactly. He did it to force them to fight with absolute desperation. Knowing retreat was impossible, fired them up. And that, combined with another surprise attack he'd planned, led to victory.
So for a dispersed organization today,
Creating a sense of shared, unavoidable purpose, maybe it's a critical deadline that simply must be met, or a major competitive threat, that sense of a desperate strait. can compel incredible focused winning action from teams, even when they're far from the central command structure.
Okay, but hang on. If we're pushing teams into these high-pressure zones, these desperate straits, doesn't that absolutely rely on trust? How do you make sure that pressure leads to excellence, not just burnout or collapse, especially when you can't physically see people's day-to-day struggles?
That is the critical balancing act. Absolutely. You're not aiming for toxicity. You're aiming for intense accountability. But it must be rooted in psychological safety. The kind of commitment needed to thrive in those desperate straits depends entirely on radical honesty and deep trust.
Which leads us perfectly into the next big challenge, doesn't it?
Straight into section 2. How on earth do leaders build that psychological safety, that trust and candor, when they're not sharing the same physical space every day?
Right. And this is where, for me, it gets really, really practical. Moving from the high-level strategy down to the nuts and bolts of how people actually interact. We absolutely have to look at Pixar's brain trust.
Oh, the brain trust. It really is kind of the gold standard for figuring out how to have intense, radical candor and psychological safety at the same time.
And it's built on one core promise.
One poor promise, we will always tell each other the truth for the sake of the film. The project comes first. And crucially, the person giving the feedback, the note, has zero authority to demand a specific solution. Their only job is diagnosis.
Just point out the problem.
Point out the problem.
Yeah.
The underlying agreement is, look, we're all in this together. We all want this movie to be great, and ego stays at the door.
And they were very specific about what makes a good note.
Yes. A good note has to be specific. It has to be timely, not 6 months later. It says what's wrong or what's missing or what's just unclear. And crucially, it doesn't make demands. It doesn't say, you must do X.
Why is that non-demanding part so vital, especially remotely?
Well, think about getting feedback asynchronously, maybe in an email or a short video call. You lose so much context, right? The body language, the tone. If a note comes across as vague or demanding, it just feels like an attack. You get defensive.
Instantly.
Instantly. A good note, as Andrew Stanton put it, it's almost an art form. It should actually inspire the person receiving it, like a good teacher making a kid want to redo their homework because they see how it could be better. It's constructive criticism, emphasis on constructive.
But making that space safe for candor,
Right.
that requires constant vigilance from the leader, doesn't it? Especially in, say, a hybrid meeting, where some people are in the room, some are on screen.
Yeah.
It's easy for folks to just hang back, disengage.
Oh, absolutely. The manager's job becomes, in part, being a hyper-aware facilitator. Watching the dynamics, physical or virtual. Are people holding back? Is there too much deference to the senior person? If they sense that,
What do they do?
they might need to intervene. Maybe pull together a smaller group, a mini brain trust, where it feels safer to speak up directly without fear of looking stupid or disagreeing with the boss publicly. Because candor without empathy, that's just brutality. And it shreds trust instantly, especially in a dispersed team where trust is already harder to build.
So what's the warning sign? When does Pixar know that candor isn't working, that a project is genuinely stuck? Especially if the director is remote or the team is distributed.
According to Catmull, the ultimate litmus test is the crew, the hundreds of people actually making the movie. They get that movies often suck at first. That's normal.
Part of the process.
Right. But if the brain trust gives its notes, the director nods politely, says great feedback, and then nothing changes.
Yeah.
If 3 months later the film is basically the same, that's a huge red flag.
It signals a leadership failure.
A profound failure. The team loses faith. They see the problems, they see the feedback isn't landing, and they stop believing the project can be fixed under that leadership. When the crew loses confidence, action is needed fast.
Okay, so that's creative feedback. What about just difficult interpersonal conversations, the kind that blow up over email or Slack? The sources talk about crucial conversations or dialogue.
Yes, and they define these moments very clearly. Stakes are high, opinions differ sharply, and emotions are running strong.
Which is precisely when we tend to be at our worst.
Exactly. And in a hybrid setting, misunderstandings just explode. That text message that sounded fine in your head reads as passive-aggressive or demanding to the recipient. So dialogue isn't just talking, it's a learned skill.
A skill focused on safety.
Making it safe for both sides to share what's really going on in their heads. Their pools of meaning, as they call it. The thoughts, the feelings, the facts driving their behavior. Because if it doesn't feel safe,
People shut down or lash out.
silence or violence, they either withhold what they really think or they try to ram their viewpoint down the other person's throat. Dialogue needs mutual respect. and a sense that you're working towards a shared goal, a mutual purpose.
And there are techniques for restoring that safety when it breaks down. Brené Brown's rumbling idea comes to mind.
Rumbling is a fantastic, practical tool here. It's about checking the stories we invent about other people's intentions. Instead of reacting defensively to what you think someone meant,
You check it out.
you check it out vulnerably and honestly, using language like, okay, the story I'm making up right now is that you didn't reply to my email because you're still upset about that red line issue from last week. Is that right? I want to check in.
Enough of my making up the story.
Yeah.
Phrasing is key.
It's incredibly disarming. It immediately lowers the temperature, takes the accusation out of it, and opens the door for a conversation based on reality, not assumption. For leaders managing remote conflict, that skill is just invaluable.
So moving beyond just managing conflict to actually building real cooperation, Stephen Covey's work on interaction paradigms is relevant here, particularly win-win or no deal.
Right. Covey points out that most interactions default to less productive modes. Win-lose. I use my power or position to get my way, you lose. Or lose-win. I give in to keep the peace, I lose.
We've all been there.
Absolutely. Win-win or no deal aims higher. It's a genuine commitment to finding a third way, a synergistic solution where both parties come out significantly better off. The third alternative.
But what if you genuinely can't find that perfect solution? That's where the no-deal part is powerful.
It's incredibly powerful. It means if, after really trying, you can't find a solution that is truly win-win, you both agree, agreeably, to walk away, no deal.
And the effect of that is liberating.
Psychologically liberating. Because if no deal is always a valid option, you don't need to manipulate. You don't need to push your agenda forcefully. You don't need to use passive aggression. You can be completely open, focus solely on understanding the other person's needs and the real issues without the pressure of having to reach any agreement just for the sake of it.
You can see how that lowers the temperature in negotiations between hybrid teams fighting over resources or deadlines.
Totally. It prevents that resentment from building up silently across the distance when people feel forced into a bad compromise.
Okay, so we've established the need for trust, for candor. But that soft stuff needs a hard framework, right? Especially when people are scattered. You need crystal clear structure, accountability, which brings us back, maybe surprisingly, to military discipline, extreme ownership.
Yeah, the Jocko Willink and Leif Babin stuff. The core mantra is brutally simple. No bad teams, only bad leaders.
Uncompromising.
Utterly. Extreme ownership means the leader takes responsibility for everything. Every failure, every mistake, every shortfall in the team's performance, regardless of who actually did the task. If the team fails,
The leader failed.
the leader failed. Failed to train properly, failed to provide the right resources, failed to communicate the mission clearly enough. It demands checking your ego at the door and operating with extreme humility.
Okay, but let's push on that. If the leader takes all the blame, doesn't that risk letting high-performing team members off the hook? Does it infantilize the team if they feel their individual accountability doesn't matter as much?
That's the tension. You're right. It's a crucial distinction. The leader owns the system, the process, the outcome. The individual team members own the execution of their specific tasks within that system. The reason the leader takes the ultimate institutional blame is because ego is the biggest blocker to fixing problems. If the leader blames others, they can't honestly assess what went wrong in the system they designed or implemented. So when a team member makes a mistake, the leader's internal dialogue and often external communication needs to be, okay, I failed to set up the right checks or provide the right training or communicate the standard clearly enough to prevent that error.
So it's about systemic responsibility.
Exactly. And maintaining that mindset requires constant vigilance, being confident, yes, but never cocky. Never assuming your team is too good to fail or that competitors or challenges won't exploit weaknesses. Weaknesses which, by the way, are much harder to spot when your team is distributed.
And for distributed teams where you literally can't see what people are working on minute to minute, that clarity of objectives becomes non-negotiable, which is where OKR's objectives and key results come in.
OKRs are almost purpose-built for this challenge. They essentially replace the ambient awareness you get from physical proximity with a clear, quantitative, often asynchronous way to track progress and ensure alignment.
They keep everyone focused.
Focused, guided, and accountable for what really matters. And a key mechanism for making that accountability stick is the strict rule of ownership.
Right. The source mentioned, MyFitnessPal insisted every OKR have a single owner. Why so rigid about that? No co-owners.
Because co-ownership instantly dilutes accountability. Think about it. If an OKR is missed, and two people share ownership,
The finger-pointing starts.
or blaming the distance, or miscommunication, it creates ambiguity. A single owner means there's absolutely no confusion about who is ultimately responsible for driving that objective forward, making decisions, and reporting on progress. It cuts right through the potential fog of distributed work.
Interesting. And the sources also noted that sometimes, especially early on, the key results had to be tied to deadlines, not outcomes. Like, launch X by Y date. Why start there?
Well, particularly when you're launching something completely new, maybe a complex product in a really unpredictable market, it's incredibly difficult to set meaningful, realistic outcome metrics up front. You just don't have the data.
You're guessing.
You're essentially guessing. So the pragmatic approach is to first pin the key result to a non-negotiable deadline. We will launch MFP Premium by May 1st, 2015, get it out the door. Then once it's live, once you have real user data flowing in.
Then you can set smarter KRs.
Exactly. Then for the next cycle, you can set much more sophisticated, stretched key results based on actual projected outputs, things like user retention, conversion rates, revenue targets. That iterative approach to clarity is vital when you're navigating the uncertainty of hybrid work and product development.
This focus on clarity and ownership also extends to how decisions get made, doesn't it? Moving beyond just who's highest on the org chart. Both Kim Scott, Radical Candor, and the Multipliers authors talk about pushing decisions down.
They do. Scott's rule is quite specific, especially for larger teams, say over 20 people. She argues that decisions, and even the debates leading up to them, should generally be owned and driven by people who are not the top executive or even their direct reports.
Why? To get closer to the ground truth.
Precisely. It's a deliberate tactic to push decision-making into the facts, making sure choices are based on the reality experienced by the people doing the actual work, not filtered up through layers of hierarchy where context gets lost.
And the multipliers framework adds a layer about the process of decision-making.
Right. They emphasize rigor during the debate phase, asking the tough questions, demanding evidence, focusing on the issues, not attacking people. But once that rigorous debate happens, the process for making the final call must be crystal clear.
So everyone knows who decides.
Everyone knows if the leader, the multiplier, is making the final call or if they are explicitly delegating it to someone else. And crucially, once the decision is made, it needs to be communicated clearly, along with the rationale behind it.
That rationale is key for remote teams.
Absolutely. It ensures people don't feel decisions made somewhere else are arbitrary or based on politics. It builds buy-in because people understand the why, even if they initially disagreed.
This tension between influence and formal authority is an old one, though.
Yeah.
It's especially between staff, functions, HR, IT, specialized engineers, and the line managers actually running the business. McGregor called it trying to make water flow uphill.
Yeah, it's a classic organizational challenge. These staff groups have deep expertise, huge potential influence, but usually zero direct authority over the employees or managers they support.
And in a hybrid world, if they're seen as just enforcing rules from afar,
their influence evaporates. They become perceived as bureaucratic overhead, or worse, spies for management.
So McGregor had a pretty radical idea to preserve their influence.
He did. He suggested that any data collected by these expert staff groups, say HR analytics on engagement or IT data on tool usage, should only be reported up to management in an aggregated, anonymized form.
So you can't see individual performance.
Exactly. The individual performance of specific people or teams shouldn't be discernible from the staff group's report. This is critical in a hybrid environment. If HR starts tracking individual login times or productivity scores and reporting that up,
they become Big Brother.
Instantly, they lose all trust.
Oh.
Anonymized aggregate data allows them to identify system-wide trends and offer expert advice for improvement, positioning them as trusted advisors, not enforcers. The ideal relationship becomes like a professional and their client interdependent, mutually influential, but not based on hierarchy.
Okay, so we've talked structures, processes, communication.
Mm-hmm.
But all of this antifragility, candor, ownership, it all hinges on the leader's own internal state, right? Their character, their discipline.
Right.
Without that solid core, everything else crumbles under pressure.
Couldn't agree more. It brings us back to Covey again, and maybe his most fundamental principle, the PPC balance.
The goose and the golden egg.
The classic fable. It's such a simple but profound model for effectiveness. P represents production, the golden eggs, the immediate results, the output. PC represents production capacity, the goose itself, the asset that produces the results.
So the people, the culture, the tools.
The team's well-being, the relationships, the systems, the training, everything that enables future production. Effectiveness, true effectiveness, is always a balance between the two.
And the obvious lesson, yet the one we violate constantly, especially when things get tough.
Is don't kill the goose. Don't sacrifice your long-term production capacity, PC, for the sake of short-term results. In a high-pressure hybrid environment, it's so tempting to just push for immediate output, demand longer hours, skip the nice-to-have stuff like training or team building.
Squeeze out more golden eggs right now.
Right, but that's a functional failure. Leaders must consciously invest in PC activities, developing their people, maintaining culture across distance, improving processes, ensuring mental health support, protecting time for planning and prevention. That PC investment is what keeps the urgent, important quadrant I fires manageable and ensures the team can keep producing eggs tomorrow and the day after.
That internal balance also shows up in Covey's definition of maturity, which he framed as the balance between courage and consideration.
Yeah, it's a really useful framework. High consideration but low courage. That leads to lose-win. You're agreeable, you avoid conflict to be liked, but you don't stand up for your convictions or the organization's needs. You end up being nice, but maybe ineffective.
And the opposite, high courage, low consideration.
That's win-lose. Strong, maybe ego-driven, pushes their agenda, doesn't really care about the impact on others or relationships. They might get results short-term, but often leave a trail of damaged trust.
So the goal, the win-win approach we talked about earlier,
Requires both high courage and high consideration. Covey called it being twice as tough. You need the courage to state your views clearly, to hold boundaries, to say no when needed, to challenge assumptions respectfully. But you balance that with genuine consideration for the other person's perspective, feelings, and convictions. Finding that mature balance is the bedrock for building mutual respect and enabling effective collaboration, especially across the potential divides of hybrid work.
and underlying all of this internal work, there's a deeper philosophical foundation, isn't there? Ideas about personal freedom, responsibility, drawing from people like Viktor Frankl.
Frankl's work, born from unimaginable suffering, offers such a powerful insight for leaders feeling lost in the chaos. His point was, you shouldn't ask, what is the meaning of my life? Instead, recognize that life is asking you. Meaning isn't something you invent in a vacuum. It's something you detect, you respond to, through the responsibilities placed in front of you.
So connecting that back to Covey's habits.
Yeah.
Habit 1, be proactive. Says, you are the programmer, you have choice, you're responsible.
Right.
And habit 2, begin with the end in mind, says, write the program. Commit to a mission based on your principles.
Exactly. Personal responsibility, proactivity is the foundation. It's the first step in consciously creating your purpose. And for a hybrid leader, who often has immense freedom over how and when they work, that freedom comes bundled with immense responsibility. You have to choose to lead effectively, to build the culture, to maintain the connections.
So the ultimate aim for the leader navigating this hybrid world is to cultivate that internal foundation.
Yes, to develop a fixed, unchanging core of principles. That core provides the internal security, the guidance, the wisdom, and the power needed to navigate the external chaos.
And that allows you to make and keep commitments.
To yourself and to others. That integrity flowing from your core principles is the absolute cornerstone of trust. And trust, when you boil it all down, is the non-negotiable requirement for leading dispersed hybrid teams successfully in this volatile new world. #tech outro. You know, what's really striking as we pull all these threads together from ancient China to modern tech companies is how they all converge. These incredibly diverse sources, they all point to the same fundamental requirements for leading effectively when things are uncertain.
Yeah, it's not about finding one weird trick.
No, it's this blend. You need an appreciation for volatility, seeing it not just as a threat, but potentially as fuel. That's antifragility. You absolutely need authentic, sometimes vulnerable communication, the candor, the dialogue. And you need absolute, unwavering clarity on who owns what, the extreme ownership, the OKRs.
So the hybrid paradox, this tension, it's not really solved by some perfect policy document dictating office days.
Probably not. It's solved, or at least navigated, by leaders cultivating deep principles within themselves and their teams. What we've seen across these sources is that real excellence comes from leaders who can hold two seemingly contradictory ideas at once, operating with that beginner's mind, always questioning, always learning, ready to discard old assumptions about management,
While
while also having the courage, the humility, and the accountability of a seasoned professional who takes complete ownership.
that's a tall order.
It is. And it leads to a final thought. We talked about anti-fragile systems needing stressors to get stronger. If we accept Grove's point that we can't stop these big environmental changes, like the shift to hybrid work.
Then the stressors will keep coming, whether we like it or not.
Exactly. So the provocative question for you, the listener, becomes, what discipline, internal or external, do you need to apply to yourself? Consistently, maybe even daily, not just when things feel chaotic. What practice ensures you're actively harnessing the energy of that disorder, using it to get stronger, rather than being weakened by it?
How do you make yourself, and by extension your organization, truly anti-fragile?
That ongoing internal work, that commitment, that feels like the ultimate leadership challenge posed by this hybrid world.